I want you to get together.
I have found some new things since the last time we talked that I did want to bring up.
Hmm.
Uh, so one of them was the acanthus plant. So something that I feel like maybe we could add this into the millennial kingdom, and again proving like when that happened, Jesus fulfilled everything and Christianity takes over. So I was I love going and looking at these buildings, and one of them recently I went to the Madison, Wisconsin Capitol. It's like the Capitol in Washington D.C. And but I just went around the outside, so I started looking for a video for the inside, and all of a sudden I find this guy. It's called Hidden Truth on YouTube,
Hmm.
and he's all about the Millennial Kingdom. And I find out he's going to these places saying that these are Millennial Kingdom buildings, and he points out that on top of all these columns is the acanthus plant, and I never heard of acanthus before that. Um, and what it comes from is when you break down the word thorn in Greek or Hebrew, it's talking about this plant called the acanthus, which goes back to Adam and Eve, and when they sinned, God cursing, and he put thorns. It talks about in Genesis thorns, which again translate to this acanthus plant. Um, so acanthus plant is this thorny plant. It's almost like a grapevine. It looks like, but it has thorns. And in one of the New Testaments, Jesus talks about it, and where you can't get grapes from acanthus, from thorns. So anyway, we all know that Jesus had the crown of thorns,
Hmm.
which would translate to the acanthus. So he had the acanthus plant around his head. So this guy started pointing out that on top of all these columns is the acanthus plant, like the crown of Jesus. So was
Hmm.
this something that was real? And then Jesus was crucified, rose again, and the millennial kingdom began. The acanthus plant is gone, and one of the styles that people were building these millennial kingdom structures is with this acanthus plant to again represent Jesus. Now,
Hmm.
mainstream will make it like this is a Greek thing. I think their story is like 50 years before Jesus, this Greek architect is like, hey, I'm going to start building all these things for the acanthus plant. But that could just be a cover story, right? Like most of the mainstream history we're taught. So I wanted to bring that up to you. I thought maybe you and your audience would really be into it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if you and maybe that guy could talk. I think he's one of us, talking about the millennial kingdom and something I never heard anyone talk about before. And
interesting. Well, I've had. We were talking about this before, and I can't get the images up now to share with you guys because it seems like whenever I turn my browser on is when we start getting sound problems. Clearly, my internet's being stretched tonight for some reason. It shouldn't, because I should have like 100 megabits per second upload speed and everything. Everything should be good. So I don't know what's going on. There's always tech gremlins whenever good conversations abound. It's I find. Um, but either way, we were looking at it, and if people are curious, you can type in acanthus. It's literally Acanthus, acanthus plant, and you'll find at the top of Roman and Greek pillars, this leafy pattern appears before the square plateau at the top. And it seems like I said, they equate it to the Roman Empire and the Greek late Greek Empire as well. And if you actually look into it, it's fascinating because it is like a very odd looking plant. And I think you can get the flowering version today as well, but it's mainly the leaves they were obsessed with rather than the flower on these pillars. So it is a thing, and you're saying it actually links to the biblical acanthus, the thorn, the crown worn by Jesus. And what you're basically implying here is that if these buildings were actually built during the millennial reign, then what these are a testimony to Christ and wearing the crown, the thorn crown, at the top of the pillars as like a symbol for his life, and art was being made dedicated to his life symbolically. So of course these pillars were adorned in this plant, and that is an interesting take. Obviously, people who are against ideas like historical revisionism, who wouldn't want to remove the history as we know it, but somehow squeeze in the millennial reign into it somewhere, and would say, well, that's nonsense. That can't make any sense. But then I did some look into Daniel, the prophecies in Daniel, and it was talking in there about think it's Daniel 7. and pretty much the whole thing there. And he's talking about the beasts and the beast system and the four beasts that would rise up. And metaphorically speaking, it seems like the last and final beast before Christ comes. It seems like it's talking to me about the Roman Empire. And it says it's more diverse. Yes. Is more diverse than any of the other beasts that came before. And all the other beasts have been equated to some kind of animal, like a leopard or an eagle. You know what I mean? Things like this. But this beast doesn't have an animal equated to it. It's like a weird amalgam. It's just a straight up a beast. And it says it's more diverse. Interesting language. It says it has the claws of iron and the teeth of brass and all these type of things. And it sounds like an industrial kingdom with powerful metal weapons, like guns and bullets, let's say, which are, you know, tips, like brass tips and all these type of things. And but it says this kingdom was before and after. And it seems like it's talking about it's this kingdom that comes back after the millennial reign. But it also says in the middle, right in the middle of Daniel 7, the saints are given this kingdom. It's taken away from the rulers who ruled it at the time, and it's handed over to Jesus' saints to rule instead. So what it's basically saying, if this is a millennial kingdom reinterpretation, it doesn't get destroyed. Rome doesn't get destroyed necessarily. Not all the buildings just don't get raised all of a sudden and they start from scratch. They keep them, but they're given to the saints and then repurposed for Christ's kingdom instead. And it even says the people who were ruling this kingdom have to live during the millennial reign and watch their kingdom be ruled by somebody else. And, you know, and it even says their life is extended and they're kind of forced as a punishment to watch somebody else rule everything they built. But then obviously when Christ's reign ends, they just took over again and they filled the vacuum and took their place. And that kingdom, the fourth beast kingdom, rose again for the little season. But this time it's being ruled by secret societies, the Freemasons, who are likely these descendants of the old rulers and all these type of things, you know. And it's kind of like we have kind of like a new Rome revival today, don't we? Everyone's obsessed with the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, is it possible why we see all this Roman architecture everywhere? It's because it was a pre-millennial reign thing, but then Gothic architecture started to get introduced, mixed among all of this Roman architecture. So the Roman arches were being replaced by the tall arches, the Gothic arches instead, you know, within cathedrals and things like this. Rather than a round arch, it became a spired arch, which made buildings taller and grander. So a new method of architecture came along to make buildings grander and more detailed. And arch is a relatively simple concept, but and we're not saying you have to be super advanced people to make buildings based on the principle of arches, but the fact that they weren't there prior to what supposedly would be the kingdom being established is very fascinating as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if many of these Roman or millennial kingdom buildings that maybe were built afterwards in a similar style to the Roman Empire started to incorporate on top of the pillars these leaves instead to kind of maybe repurpose them to be symbolic of Christ's victory over the old system, perhaps. Just a complete spitball theory there. Interesting take. Do you have any ideas based on the things I've said there?
Yeah, no, like usual, me and you kind of see a lot of things the same. I've always felt that it's clear Rome's the fourth beast in that, like you were saying. And, you know, I'm someone for many years who keeps telling people, like, when they talk about, one of the famous quotes was Rome ruled the world. That's basically everyone in the past said, you know, all roads lead to Rome and Rome ruled the world. But then right away we get these experts that tell us, well, you know, the known world was, you know, they only knew about like this part and then it stopped over there in the east. And it's like, and I look at the maps and right away I laugh because it's like, it'll be like cut off like halfway through Africa and it's like, what, they didn't know there was more land? Like they just stopped. You know, it's not even like there was a sea in the way like they could make with America or whatever, but, or they didn't go further east past, you know, Afghanistan or whatever. No, I think clearly, you know, when they said Rome ruled the world and they were everywhere. America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia. I think they became a world power. They took over everything that was in the past. And, you know, and then it was just so bad. And then we have the Jesus stuff. And I feel like these things seem like they might have been Roman buildings, or maybe even Babylonian buildings, I'm willing to say, because some of these things are so buried. Was it from the flood? Was it from Babylon? I mean, but either way, when Christianity took over, like we feel with the Millennial Kingdom, the people that were here were taking off the big phalluses and putting up a cross, and and they took it all over. And then there's the stories too that saints were building, because some of these things aren't, just the cathedrals that we see in our towns that are really nice, but there's some beautiful things out there, whether it's St. Petersburg in Russia or, France or wherever, that it could have been angels. And recently people have been bringing out stuff. I saw that big channel, My Lunch Break, recently has now come out and talked about the angels, and he pointed out like one of these sites, like it was known in the beginning that angels built that. And like the last time I was on, when we were told that Michelangelo did this, is that just like slang for Michael the Archangel? Like Michael the Angel, Michelangelo. Do they want us not to know? Like you said, when the short season started, and they, the church and everything starts getting corrupted, what's the first thing is they're going to try to hide the timelines. They're going to hide that Christ, like if they're pushing like, hey, there's going to be Armageddon and all this stuff's got to happen down the line in futurism, then you got to hide that the Millennial Kingdom was just here and all these beautiful buildings and stuff. You start saying, oh, that symbol there, that obelisk, that's for Osiris's penis. That's not a Christian symbol. That's another thing I've been finding even more and more the past, since me and you have talked, finding so many of these Greek, because I love archaeology. I for so long, I just love getting into archaeology and finding these things that they dig up, and they're there, this beautiful Greek mosaic. And they'll look at it and they'll be like, oh, this can't be, this got to be pagan because there's a penis. But is that a penis showing you that, because now, like with Paul, they were getting away from the Jewish law. Like, it doesn't matter if you're circumcised or not. It's all about Jesus. A lot of these symbols, I truly believe, are Christian symbols that they've now, the Masons and these secret societies like to make us think that this is all their pagan stuff from the past. And,
it's funny. It's funny on that. I've heard this idea come up quite a lot that even Egypt is all just made up by Napoleon. Napoleon built the pyramids, and it was actually all just made up stuff to start covering up what happened. You know what I mean? And it said, oh, there was this civilization, this Egyptian civilization with all these weird symbols, and it's all pagan stuff about. And I don't know if that's true. I've just heard these ideas that it's it would attest to this idea that these actually were originally all Christian symbols that have just been hijacked by the invention of false geographical locations, and then a whole false history written after the fact. But I couldn't say for sure whether that was true or not. But there is this odd, cheesy, weird obsession in the West about Egyptian culture, and you go to Egyptian museums, don't you? And it's kind of, you do have to wonder sometimes, like, is that really what it was like? Is this all?
Yeah, that's why I feel like it's like a newer thing, probably the late 1800s, where again these demons come out because it's the short season. They don't have to be hidden, because they would have been, everybody would have called them out in the past if they were talking Luciferian stuff or pagan stuff. So then once the short season starts, they slowly start putting out their stuff again and bringing out all this pagan stuff again. And right away you got to hide that Jesus ruled and Christianity had just ruled for 1,000 years. So that's not a Christian symbol, that's Egyptian. And that's how I'm seeing it, that this stuff, Egypt wasn't a superpower. Why are there obelisks everywhere? You know what I mean? There's pyramids everywhere.
Well, it's odd, yeah. I mean, even just in like small villages here in England have obelisks everywhere. Like they're literally scattered wherever Rome was. Obelisks have been erected. And again, if we're doing this reevaluation of history, is it possible that these were erected, no pun intended, after the Roman Empire as like an artistic remembrance of, like I said, the Old Covenant and all these type of things? I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that, well, Christ wouldn't create artwork. He's not interested in that kind of thing, And I would say, well, people are interested in artwork, and people who are living in a kingdom where Satan is no longer there to bother them would end up with a lot of time and creativity and unhindered freedom to create
Great
artwork.
point.
Yeah, and
Great point.
they would try and remember stuff, and they would make images to
And
remember.
build things that are going to last for like 1,000 years instead
Yeah,
of things we build now that
yeah,
2030 the wood's rotting and your vinyl siding is garbage and
yeah.
you're,
With some
you're adding.
yeah, they add some details, some flourishes, make it look good as well as functional. And not only was these buildings incredibly functional and hardy and sustainable and just lasted so long and weather resistant, it seems, but they also looked incredible. They were pieces of artwork, you know. And I think that's
Yeah,
something
and they
very
got
human.
sacred geometry, like special acoustics,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like again, maybe the Masons and secret society people, some of them know this type of stuff now, but again, I think it could have been supernatural, like angels that, to them it's nothing. But
Mm-hmm.
because like even some of these buildings, like some of the marble slabs for just a banister is like, who moved that?
Mm-hmm.
How did you cut that? It just seems supernatural, some of the stuff, when you really start looking into like just the weight of the stairs in the Capitol building. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just, maybe it was supernatural angels
Well,
that were ruling.
there's a beautiful place in just north of France, off the coast of France, called Mont Saint Michael, and it is literally an
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. Oh
it's
man.
incredible, isn't it? Just looking at that thing, and it's in the middle of the sea, and you can only get to it when the tide is incredibly low by foot. And if not, you're going by boat, any other time. And it's literally just a beautiful church cathedral on top of a hill. How do you do that, first of all? Like, and it's like a mountain, but at the top, the peak is a church, that's built into the mountain, and it's just surrounded with houses, and people live on there. It's like a closed community, and you look at that kind of thing. It's like we wouldn't build anything close to something like that today. We wouldn't bother. It's just so much love and attention was put into that alone, and the effort to get the resources out there it must have taken for these supposedly primitive people at the time. It basically building in the sea. You know what I mean? And then the name is an odd. It seems like a nod and a wink, doesn't it? No, is it possible? Is it possible the angel Michael just built that, and that's what was going on at that time? Stuff like that was really happening at that time in a true psychedelic, weird, trippy, physical sense, or whether it's
And to me, it seems like a lot of these early Christian books, apocrypha books, Gospel of Nicodemus, a lot of the oldest Christian writings and stuff, seems like they were all about this stuff.
hmm.
They were all about saints. And the other thing that I'd like to talk to you and your audience about is the harrowing of hell. I thought that this.
I want you to get together.